The puppy lived in a hole like a tiny bunker he dug just to survive, and thousands walked past. A 4-month-old black and tan German Shepherd puppy dragged himself into the light, dust coughing off his coat at noon. Heat wobbled off the asphalt. Dry weeds scratched the curb. Engines hummed, horns blinked, a city going nowhere fast. I'd only stepped out on an errand. I'm 46, not a rescuer, not a vet, just a man with a paper bag and a heart that suddenly wouldn't sit still. Then I heard it, the thin, breaking sound of air pulled through fear. He rose from a ragged pit he'd carved with his own small paws, dirt clinging to his lashes. His eyes were too large for his face, glassy and wild. Powdered soil salted his muzzle. His paws were cracked, pads dry like old leather. Around his neck hung a warped, faded collar, skewed to one side, the ghost of another life. I crouched, and the ground gave a hot breath from the hole. Inside, the little room he'd built showed itself in pieces. A knotted t-shirt, torn plastic, paper cups, dented cans, greasy wrappers, sweet with syrup and stale meat, the sour bite of gasoline. People had thrown food here, that much was clear. No one had taken him home. He saw me and vanished, like a match blown out. Only darkness and 2 wet sparks stared from the deep. I didn't move. I spoke low, the way you speak to a storm you hope will pass. I wanted him to become a rescued puppy, but right now he was just a shaking breath pressed into dirt. I leaned closer, not to reach, only to understand. The sun slid on my forearms. The curb burned through my jeans. All I could see were his eyes, waiting for my mistake. I understood it in a single quiet bolt. This wasn't shade. This was the address he'd learned to say with his body. He dug himself a home in the ground because no one gave him one. His whole life was built out of trash. I stayed there on the curb, knees aching, pretending I wasn't staring into a grave someone forgot to fill. When my eyes adjusted, I started to see his furniture. A knotted, sweat-stained t-shirt bunched into a kind of pillow. A ripped plastic bag flattened into a blanket. Paper cups crushed sideways, catching old rain and soda. Rusty soda cans. Grease-soaked food wrappers clinging to the dirt like wallpaper for a stray puppy that nobody ordered. The collar around his neck told a different story. It had once been bright, maybe blue or red, now faded into a tired grayish strip. Stretched holes, bent buckle. A faint pattern rubbed almost smooth where fingers used to play with it. Somebody had chosen him. Bought that collar, clipped it on a smaller neck, probably laughed at his first clumsy steps. Somebody looked at this same little German Shepherd puppy and said, "He's mine." And then one day they said it with their hands in reverse. They let go. I lowered myself closer, palms open, voice slow. "Hey, buddy," I whispered. "I'm not going to hurt you. You're not supposed to live in the ground." Every time I eased a little nearer, his body tensed like a wire. He scooted backward until the hole swallowed him. A soft whine rose out of the dark, thin and cracked, like it had been used too often. I stopped trying to be brave and just tried to be kind. From my paper lunch bag, I tore off a piece of chicken, laid it by the rim, then took a few steps back, then a few more. I crossed the street and leaned on my car, pretending to scroll my phone, heart hammering in my ears. He waited. Cars passed. Voices drifted. Finally, when the sidewalk around him was empty and quiet, he slid up from the hole, belly low, eyes locked on the horizon. He snatched the food so fast his paws slipped, then chewed in hard, desperate gulps, glancing over his shoulder every other bite. I watched him from that distance and felt something settle that I didn't like. It wasn't just fear in his eyes. It was routine, as if a hole in the ground and leftovers were all he expected from life now. And right there, I knew I couldn't just be another person who walked away. I went back to work, but the hole in the ground followed me. Emails, meetings, small talk about nothing. My body was in a chair, but my mind was stuck on a stray puppy staring up from a pit of trash. By the time traffic crawled into the late afternoon, my chest felt like it had a rock in it. I'm not a volunteer, I'm not a vet, I'm not a hero. I'm just a tired 46-year-old man who suddenly can't stop thinking about one abandoned puppy living in the dirt. On the drive home, I passed the turn I usually take. My hands moved before my head did. I pulled into a pet store parking lot, sat there for a minute with the engine off, and asked myself what I thought I was doing. Then I went in anyway. I picked out a cheap metal bowl, nothing fancy, just something that wouldn't crack the first time it hit concrete. A big bottle of water, a bag of good food made for a rescued puppy, with pictures of shiny coats and round bellies on the front. I put it all on the counter, cards shaking just a little when I paid. The light was still bright when I got back to that sidewalk. Same curb, same dry weeds, same square of earth torn open like a wound. I set the bowl near the edge of the hole, poured water until it shivered at the rim, then added a small pile of kibble. Every move slow, careful, like I was diffusing something that could explode. He appeared in pieces. First the nose, testing the air. Then the eyes, wider than they had any right to be. His whole body shivered, eyes darting from me to the street, like fear and hunger were fighting inside his ribs. I backed away. 10 steps, then 20. Crossed the road and slid down behind my car, watching through the windshield like a coward and a witness at the same time. It took a long time. Long enough for the shadows to stretch out, long enough for the world to forget him again. And then he crawled out. All of him. Spine sharp, ribs counting themselves under his skin, shoulder blades jutting like wings trying to push through, tail tucked tight but nose pulled toward the smell of food. He went for the water first. He drank like he'd been thirsty for years, mouth buried in the bowl, sides heaving. Then he switched to the food, fast, messy bites, lifting his head every couple of seconds, ready to bolt if the world turned cruel again. I caught myself whispering in the empty car, "I'll come back tomorrow." That night at home, I told my wife about the hole, the trash, the way that little body shook over a metal bowl. I watched the worry light up in her eyes. "Tomorrow," she said quietly, already deciding for both of us, "we'll go to him together." The next day, that hole in the ground was on our schedule like a meeting we couldn't cancel. We walked there together after work, two regular people carrying a bag of puppy food and a clean metal bowl. My wife didn't say much at first. She just squeezed my hand when she saw the dirt cave at the edge of the sidewalk and the faint shine of a collar in the dark. We poured out fresh water, the bottle glugging into the bowl, and added new food, richer than yesterday's scraps. This time, we set the bowl a little closer to where we sat, not right at the rim, not far away, just in between. Then we lowered ourselves onto the concrete, backs against a tired old fence, and started talking. We didn't use special words. No baby talk. Just ordinary sentences said in soft living room voices like we were already home and he was just on the other side of the doorway. My wife told him about the weather. I told him about my day. We let our voices roll out and fall into that hole where a stray puppy was hiding. He stayed down there longer than I wanted, but he peeked out more often. First, just the nose, catching the scent of fresh water. Then the eyes, flicking between us, trying to decide if we were danger or background noise. His ears twitched at our voices, little radar dishes trying to lock onto something that made sense. Days blurred together in small, stubborn colors. One afternoon, I was in a blue t-shirt, traffic thick and impatient behind us. Another day, I wore an old gray one, the street quieter, air cooler. Sometimes there were kids yelling a block away, sometimes just the wind and the low rumble of engines. But every day there was a bowl, clean water, good food, and two people sitting on the ground, talking to a puppy who still didn't trust them. He started coming out sooner, first after we'd walked halfway down the block, then when we were just across the street. He ate with his body still tight but not shaking so hard, lifting his head now and then, listening to our voices instead of just watching for escape routes. One evening, the sky turning soft and the traffic thinning, he finished his last bite and didn't dive straight back into the dark. He paused, right there on the dirt, paws dusty, tail low but not tucked all the way in. He lifted his head and looked straight at us. It was the first look that wasn't pure panic. There was something else in it, small and painful. A question, sitting right on the surface of his eyes. "Are you really coming back tomorrow?" And there was no way on earth I could let that question hang there unanswered. A week went by and it felt like we were visiting a wall with eyes. Every evening we walked the same stretch of cracked sidewalk. Every evening we filled the same bowl, said the same soft words, watched the same stray puppy hover between us and the dark. He would come out faster now, but there was still a clear line drawn in the dirt. If my shoe crossed it, even by an inch, he spun and shot back into his hole, whining under his breath, whole body trembling like it remembered something my eyes couldn't see. I started to feel stupid, helpless. like maybe love and good food weren't enough to fix what someone else had broken. You can see ribs on a rescued puppy and know what he's missing. It's harder when the hunger is inside his head. One night, after he bolted from my outstretched hand again, I sat on the curb longer than usual. My wife slid down next to me, knees bumping mine. I don't know if we can change this, I admitted. The words tasted like failure, but I know I can't leave him here. The next morning, we drove to a vet clinic with no dog in the car, just pictures on my phone and too many questions. We showed the doctor the hole, the trash, the collar, explained how he wouldn't let us near him. He listened without rushing us, then shook his head gently. "You can't grab that kind of fear," he said. "You'll hurt him or lose him if you try. Same place, same time, same voices, same routine. Let him decide to come toward you." He suggested leaving something that smelled like us, an old sweatshirt, maybe even a small toy, near his den, so our scent could turn into something familiar instead of threatening. That evening, I brought a worn sweatshirt from my closet, the one that held years of sweat and soap and workday air. I laid it a few steps from the lip of his hole. He flinched at the sight of it, nose twitching, not sure if this new thing was danger or gift. We didn't push. We left his food and water, spoke to him for a while, then walked away. The next day when we came back, the bowl was empty. The water line had dropped, and the sweatshirt was gone. I stepped closer and saw a bit of gray fabric pulled deep into the darkness like the ground itself had swallowed it. My wife exhaled, a tiny, shaky laugh. "He took you home," she whispered, and for the first time, it felt like he'd opened the door just a crack for us to do the same. At some point, standing over that hole, I realized I couldn't keep calling him Buddy forever. I've never been good at leaving things unnamed. If something stays in my life long enough to live in my head, it gets a name. I watched that little body, black and tan under a crust of dust, crawl in and out of the ground like smoke from a fire that refused to go out, his fur like burned wood and ash, like he'd pulled himself out of his own ashes. "Hey, Cinder." I heard myself say it before I decided to. The word just slipped out, soft and low, and hung over the opening of his den. He froze halfway between light and dark, ears tilting forward, eyes squinting like he was trying to reach back for a memory he didn't quite have. Then he vanished again, but the name stayed. From that day on, that's all we called him. No more puppy, no more little guy. Just Cinder, said 100 different ways, gentle, amused, worried, tired. Sometimes, when he was mid-chew over his bowl, one ear would flick at the sound like he was learning the shape of it. We brought him his first toy one evening. Nothing fancy, just a small rubber ball that fit in my palm. I rolled it to the edge of his world and backed off. He stared at it like it might explode. For a couple of days it sat untouched, a bright dot on the dirt. Then, slowly, it began to migrate closer to the hole, and one afternoon I saw tiny teeth marks around the edge. He was testing what it felt like to have something that was his and not just trash. One night, the quiet broke hard. A garbage truck roared up the street, metal clanging, bins slamming, the kind of sound that can rip straight through your chest. Cinder shot out of the hole in blind panic, bolting toward the open space, the road not far beyond. "Cinder, stay," I said. Not a shout, just a sharp, low line of sound. He skidded, claws scraping gravel, body shaking. Then, against every old instinct that told him to run from everything, he turned. He spun back toward the hole and dove inside, pressing himself into the dirt, eyes locked on me instead of the noise. In that moment, I understood something heavy. My voice wasn't just another threat anymore. It had become a point on his map. And with that came the thought that scared me more than the truck. If he was already starting to listen to me, I didn't have the right to leave him living in the ground. The day I saw the sign, my stomach dropped before I even finished reading it. A bright notice was stapled crooked on the fence near Cinder's hole. City crews scheduled to clear the lot, fill low areas, remove debris. Work to begin in the next few days. To anyone else, it was just cleanup. To a stray puppy living in the ground, it was a bulldozer aimed at his front door. I stood there staring at the words, feeling the back of my neck go hot. That ragged den had kept him alive. Now it could bury him, or disappear with him inside, if we were one day too late. We sat down by the edge like we always did, but this time there was no easy small talk. My wife and I looked into the darkness and just told him the truth, like you do with a scared kid who deserves honesty. Cinder, I said quietly, they're going to bring big machines here. It's going to get loud. There'll be people walking all over this place. You can't stay in this hole forever, little man. You've got to come with us. Of course, he didn't understand the words, but animals are experts in tone. He heard the shake in my voice, the way her hand kept brushing the ground like she was trying to anchor herself to him. His eyes blinked up at us, faster than usual. His ears kept twitching. We stayed longer after that. Some evenings we read out loud from whatever we had. Emails on our phones, a cookbook, an old paperback. Sometimes we said nothing at all, like it just let him listen to the quiet sound of two people who had decided he mattered. We shifted his treats a little closer to our shoes, inch by inch. Any time I reached out more than that, though, he backed into the shadows, body low, ready to vanish if we pushed too hard. I lived in a knot those days. If I moved too fast, I could scare him into running toward something worse. If I didn't move at all, a truck might come and cover his whole world with dirt and gravel. Both pictures kept me up at night. One evening, as the sun was melting into a soft orange behind the buildings, Cinder crept out for dinner. We stayed very still. He ate slower than usual, pausing between bites, listening to our breaths. When he finished, he didn't bolt. He took one hesitant step toward me, then another. Dust puffed under his paws. My hand lay on the ground, fingers loose, palm open. His nose brushed the tips of my fingers, just a whisper of touch, like an electrical shock straight to my chest. And then, in a blink, he flinched and sprang back, disappearing into the dark again. I sat there, hands still out, feeling the ghost of that tiny touch. Time was running out, and trust was still dangerously thin. The morning it happened, we heard the ground before we saw the machines. Heavy engines, low and steady, rolled through the quiet like distant thunder. Metal scraped. Hydraulics hissed. When we turned the corner, there they were at the far end of the lot. Trucks backing up, a tractor dragging its blade, workers in bright vests shouting over the noise. The earth under our feet vibrated in short, nervous shivers. Dust lifted in thin clouds. Cinder felt it all before we reached him. By the time we got to his hole, he was wedged into the deepest corner of his den, eyes wide, barely a sliver of him visible in the dark. I knelt down, heart pounding with the rhythm of the machines. "Hey, Cinder," I murmured, trying to keep my voice calm and failing. "It's just us, buddy." His breathing came in fast, broken bursts. Every time the tractor's blade slammed against rock, he flinched so hard his collar jingled. My wife crouched beside me, fingers digging into her own knees. "If you grab him now, he could bite," she whispered. "He's terrified. He could hurt you. He could hurt himself." She wasn't wrong. A cornered, rescued puppy doesn't think. He just explodes. I reached in a little, hand open, palm up. He recoiled so fast he hit the back wall of the hole, eyes gone glassy and far away, as if he wasn't seeing me anymore at all, just whatever had come before. Weeks of patient trust building crumbled in that stare. I pulled my hand back, then tried again, slower. Same result. Each time I moved, his fear spiked, his body folding into itself, a soft whine leaking out like air from a punctured tire. It felt like we were losing him in real time. The tractor started to work its way down the lot, closer to our corner. I heard one of the workers call out that they needed this side cleared by evening. They were just doing their job. To them it was trash and uneven dirt. To a stray puppy, it was the only shelter he knew. We sat there, caught between a hole and a hard place. The machines growled closer. Cinders shook harder. I stared into that cramped, filthy den, then out at the moving steel, and the thought hit me clean and merciless. If I climb in there and he bolts, it's over. But if I don't climb in there at all, it's over too. So I did the only thing left that made sense, and no sense at all. I climbed into the ground with him. The dirt wall scraped my arms as I slid down, knees digging into the packed earth. The hole was smaller than it looked from above, close and hot. Air thick with the smell of dust, old food, and scared dog. I was face to face with him now, in the world this German Shepherd puppy had built when people stopped being safe. No one else had been down here with him. Not really. I leaned into his world, the one nobody before me had bothered to share. Cinder, I whispered. Not an order, just a name. Over and over, like a promise I was wrapping around both of us. Cinder, it's me. It's okay. You're okay, little man. He shook so hard the collar rattled against his neck. A low, unsure growl rumbled in his chest, more question than threat. His eyes were a storm, terror and exhaustion tied together. 4 months old, but he looked at me like a dog who'd lived 10 lifetimes of being let down. A rescued puppy who didn't actually believe in rescue yet. I lifted my hand, slow as sunrise, and stopped halfway. Didn't grab, didn't reach for his neck or his legs. I just let my fingers rest in the space between us, close enough that he could touch me if he wanted, far enough that he didn't have to. The whole world narrowed to that gap of air and the sound of our breathing. Time stretched. Outside, metal groaned and men shouted. Down here, there was only one choice being made. 1 inch at a time. Cinder didn't bolt, didn't slam himself into the back of the den. He took a tiny step forward, then another, like walking through wet cement. And then he broke. He pushed his whole shaking body against my chest, buried his nose under my chin, and pressed there like he was trying to hide inside my bones. I wrapped my arms around him, feeling every rib, every tremor. My wife's hands appeared at the rim above us, lowering a loop of leash and the old collar we'd brought, and I slipped it on him with slow, clumsy fingers. Together we rose, inch by inch, me carrying him like something fragile, his claws hooked into my shoulder. But he didn't fight to get away. When we reached the car, I opened the back door and set him down. For a second he froze, then climbed into the corner of the seat on his own, curling tight, eyes on us instead of the road. I shut the door and knew, as the latch clicked, that this was the last day he would ever live in the ground. We didn't go home first. We drove straight to the vet. The lobby was all hard linoleum and bright lights, smelling like antiseptic and nervous fur. Other dogs sat with their people, tails thumping, noses bumping hands, leashes loose. Our stray puppy was a grayish knot in the corner of the bench, pressed so far back into the seat it was like he was trying to disappear. His eyes never left our legs. When they called us in, I carried him. He was lighter than he looked there, all bone and fear and dirty fur. On the exam table he froze, claws skittering once on the metal before he locked up. I put my hand right by his nose, my wife on the other side, so his whole world was just 2 familiar smells and a quiet voice. The vet moved slowly, talking more to him than to us. "Hey, little guy," he murmured, lifting an ear, checking teeth, listening to that small, racing heart. Cinder trembled under every touch, a low whine locked in his throat. But he didn't snap, didn't try to leap off. Every time he thought about bolting, his nose bumped my fingers, and he stayed. The verdict came in pieces. He was painfully thin. Worms, fleas, skin irritated from dirt and scratching, but no broken bones, no mangled joints, no hidden internal damage from some impact we never saw. For a stray puppy who'd spent so long living in a hole, it was almost absurdly good news. The vet wrote out a plan. Medications, baths with special shampoo, real food on a schedule, follow-ups. "He can have a normal life," he said, looking from Cinder to us. "If you're willing to put in the work, he has every chance." Something in my chest finally cracked. Not from pity, but from relief so sharp it felt like grief in reverse. I stood there with my hand on that little black and tan back and let my eyes fill without swallowing it down this time. On the way home, the engine hummed low and steady. Halfway through the drive, Cinder eased down on the back seat and closed his eyes. His paw slid forward until it rested on my boot, claws just touching leather. It was his first sleep on the road, not in a dirt hole, but with people beside him. And feeling the weight of that tiny paw, I knew there was no going back for any of us. A month later, our house didn't look like the same place that used to just hold 2 tired adults. There was a dog bed in the corner of the living room now, sun hitting it in the late afternoon. 2 bowls lined up on a mat, one for water, one for food, like permanent promises on the floor. A soft rug lay over the slick tile where his paws used to slide. Toys slowly multiplied. Rubber bone, rope, that same little ball, all orbiting around one black and tan former stray puppy who wasn't sleeping in the ground anymore. His first bath at home felt more like a ceremony than a chore. We filled the tub shallow with warm water, no rush, no splashing. My palms stayed on his back, steady, while my wife poured water with a cup instead of turning on the roaring faucet. He shook, but he didn't try to climb out. The old sweatshirt he once dragged into his den lay folded near his new bed, smelling like safety instead of survival. Life came in flashes after that. Cinder padding cautious circles around the yard, nose buried in the grass, tail gradually lifting from under his belly, stopping to lift his head and taste air that wasn't full of dust and exhaust. Cinder drifting off to sleep, curled tight at first, paws tucked underneath, always ready to spring. Then, slowly, he began to roll onto his side, legs loose. The first night he sprawled on his back, belly bare to the ceiling, paws in the air like he had nothing left to hide. I had to look away for a second so I wouldn't cry over a sleeping dog. The old fears didn't vanish. Loud bangs still made him jump. On fireworks nights, he slid under the dining table, eyes wide, body low. But this time, instead of searching for a hole in the ground, he watched our feet, waiting for us to speak, to sit, to make the world small and safe again. I used to think we were saving a stray puppy from a hole. What I didn't see right away was how he was hauling us out of our own, out of numb routines, out of days that all looked the same. This little earth child dragged us back into living, one wag, one worried glance, one clumsy game of fetch at a time. He became our reason to get up, to go outside, to care more than we complained. One evening, he walked over to the door where his old faded collar hung on a hook. He touched it with his nose just once, then turned and trotted back to the couch where we were sitting. In that small, simple choice, I understood that home for him wasn't leather or dirt anymore. Home now was us. I still think about the first moment I saw him in that hole. Back then, I was just another man walking by, ready to do what thousands before me had done. Nothing. But one look into that dark little den, one pair of frightened eyes staring up at me, and my whole life pivoted without asking permission. There are so many Cinders out there. Puppies hiding under parking lots, behind dumpsters, under stairwells and bushes and highway ramps. Little lives waiting for someone to stop, to kneel down, to see them instead of stepping over them. They don't need perfection. They need presence. This little guy's journey from abandonment to rehabilitation shows how important nonprofit rescue groups really are. The only reason a stray puppy like him gets a chance is because good people and good organizations keep showing up with open hands. Caring for a rescued puppy is more than love. It's responsibility. It's pet care. It's medicine and structure and patience you didn't know you had. It's learning to speak gently even on the days you're tired. It's washing away dirt that isn't just on fur, but somewhere deeper. If you ever see a scared dog on the street, remember this. It's not just a stray. It's someone who once belonged, someone who can belong again. Sometimes everything begins with a bowl of water placed quietly on the ground and the decision to come back tomorrow. If this story touched something in you, please share it. Sharing doesn't boost numbers, it boosts chances. Somewhere out there, another little Cinder is sitting in a hole, waiting for the right person to see them. Join our Brave Paws family. Be their voice. Be their hope.